He didn't look like a threat, just an old man in a weathered brown jacket, sitting quietly in his pickup as the sun dipped low behind Ruby's diner. His name was Albert Reading, 74 years old, a heart patient with more medals than memories he cared to talk about. His hands, once steady under enemy fire in Vietnam, now rested calmly on the steering wheel as Sam Cooke hummed from the radio. He wasn't bothering anyone. But in a small town where some still saw color before character, that calm was mistaken for suspicion. Minutes later, he was face down on the hood of his own truck, cuffed like a criminal. And yet, he didn't shout. He didn't beg. He just gave them a number, a name in his phone labeled Pentagon. What happened next reminded everyone in that town and across the country that real strength doesn't come with volume. It comes with dignity, and Sergeant Al Reading had never needed permission to carry either. He hadn't done anything. Just sat there in his old truck, hands resting on the wheel, engine off, radio low. But they said he looked suspicious. Said his jacket looked too official for someone like him. Alone, old, black. That was all it took. They didn't ask questions, didn't give him a chance. The older cop yanked open the door. The younger one grabbed his arm. They dragged him out like a thief in the night, slammed his chest onto the hood with a force that shook the old Ford's frame, and snapped on the cuffs. No reading of rights, no warning, just steel, cold and fast. He didn't resist, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, steady and calm, the heat of the hood burning through his jacket. Then he said something low, deliberate, that made the arrogance freeze on their faces. "Call the number in my phone marked Pentagon. Do it now before you ruin your careers." They laughed, loud, dismissive, smug. 10 minutes later, that smugness cracked. The radio crackled. A voice, firm, unmistakable, and far above their pay grade, cut through the static like a knife. They weren't ready for it. And by the time the unmarked black SUV rolled up outside the Greystone police station, the damage was done. Reputations burned, careers shaken, and the man they tried to humiliate, he hadn't even raised his voice. Albert Al Reading never sought attention. He wasn't the kind of man who needed a spotlight. At 74, he preferred the quiet, faded jeans, brown service jacket, a life lived with dignity, not noise. He'd worn that jacket so long it had become a part of him, just like the patch stitched on the sleeve. 101st Airborne, Vietnam, 68. That morning he'd left the VA clinic 2 towns over, picked up a refill for his heart meds and a folded thank you letter from a young doctor who spotted the insignia. The doc couldn't have been more than 30, said his dad served in Desert Storm, told Al thank you like he meant it. Al had just smiled, tipped his cap, and replied the only way he knew how. "Appreciate it, Doc." The drive back was long but peaceful. Country roads, August haze, windows cracked open to the wind. Somewhere near Route 9, his stomach gave a low growl. He smiled to himself. Ruby's diner. He hadn't been there in years, but the place hadn't changed. Same flickering neon sign buzzing over the doorway. Same checkered tile floors. Same counter stools from when he'd worked there at 16, bussing tables and mopping up spills before joining the Army. He eased his battered old pickup, still sporting his veteran plates, into a spot near the back of the gravel lot. Turned off the engine and just sat for a while, hands still on the wheel. The sun was dipping now, sky shifting from gold to deep purple. On the radio, barely audible, Sam Cooke sang of change. A cruiser sat near the front. 2 officers inside, windows half down, one young and twitchy, the other older, heavier, watching, whispering. The young one elbowed his partner. "Guy's been sitting there too long," he said. The older one shrugged, but the younger's eyes narrowed. "He hiding something?" They didn't notice the veteran of bags, didn't recognize the patch. Or maybe they did and didn't care. Inside the diner, Al gave the waitress a small nod. "Just coffee tonight," he said softly, sliding into a booth by the window. The place was quiet, a couple at the counter sharing pump, a trucker scrolling through his phone. Nobody saw the squad car slowly repositioned to block the exit, but Al did. He knew that look, that maneuver. He'd seen it before in '71, outside Pleiku, Boys with guns and too much fear behind their eyes. He didn't expect trouble, but he'd learn. Trouble didn't ask permission. It was a little past 7:30 when he stepped back outside. Night air sharp with autumn chill. He pulled his cap down low, adjusted his jacket, and reached for the door handle of his truck. Behind him, crunching gravel. A voice barked, "Hey, sir, step away from the vehicle." Too sharp, too loud. He turned slowly. Two officers, 10 feet back, one younger gripping a flashlight like it was a baton. The beam landed on his chest, square and accusing. "Evening," Al said, voice calm, hands up and visible. "Everything all right, officers?" The older one, badge red Ramsey, stepped forward. "That's your truck?" "Yes, sir." "What were you doing out here?" "Stopped for a coffee." "You been sitting out here a while?" The younger one, Holt, cut in, tone already edgy. "What's in your jacket?" Gal lifted his hand slightly higher. "Cold evening, just me and a few memories." They didn't like that. Holt sneered. "License and I—" Al moved carefully, slow and deliberate. "Left pocket, military ID too." Ramsey's eyes narrowed, nice and slow. Al pulled out his wallet, opened it, handed it over. There it was, his name, service number, and a photo from another time. A younger man in uniform, eyes set like stone. Ramsey looked it over, unimpressed. "Nice print job," he said. "Buy this online?" Al blinked. "Excuse me?" "You don't look like a paratrooper," Holt said. It wasn't curiosity, wasn't protocol, just disbelief and a quiet kind of contempt. "I served in Vietnam, 101st Airborne," Al replied. "Bronze Star. Paperwork's in the glove box if you want it." But Holt was already circling the truck. "Back of the vehicle, hands flat. Now." Al's voice stayed calm. "On what grounds?" "That did it." Ramsey stepped forward, eyes flashing. "You questioning us?" "No, sir. Just asking for due process." Too much for them to take. Ramsey grabbed his arm. Holt yanked out the cuffs. Al didn't resist, just said, quiet as a prayer, "Call the number in my phone, marked Pentagon. You'll want to do it now." They didn't. Not yet. The click of the cuffs rang loud in the still air. Al's breath clouded in the cold. They turned him, pressed him against the hood. The same truck he'd rebuilt with his grandson just last summer. "Impersonating a decorated veteran," Ramsey growled. Holt opened the cruiser door like he was unveiling a trophy, grinning. Al didn't flinch, didn't beg. Years in uniform had taught him what real strength looked like. And it wasn't loud. A voice called from the diner steps. "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" Jenny, the night waitress, still in her apron, coffee pot in hand. She looked stunned, frozen. She'd known Al for years, quiet man, kind eyes, always tipped 50%. For the ones who didn't make it home, he'd once told her. "He's a veteran," she said, stepping forward. "I've seen his ID. You're making a mistake." Ramsey puffed up, tried to wave her off. "Back inside, ma'am. Doesn't concern you." But it did. People were watching now. A teenage girl filming from across the street. Two truckers by their rigs, arms crossed. Even the cook stepped out, drying his hands on a towel, brow furrowed. Al caught Jenny's eye, didn't say a word. He didn't have to. They shoved him into the cruiser. Door slammed shut. Night swallowed the sound. Inside, leather squeaked as Ramsey and Holt slapped hands, proud of themselves. "Clean takedown," one of them muttered. Al sat straight in the back seat, wrists burning, jaw tight. Out the window, Ruby's neon glow flickered, then disappeared. "Now it's our turn," he smiled, soft and quiet, like the calm after a long storm. He leaned back in his chair, the creak of old wood matching the rhythm of a heart that had endured decades of silence, injustice, and grit. His phone, now resting beside him on the armrest, still showed the same lock screen. Him in uniform, Sheila beside him, smiling outside Fort Campbell like the world hadn't yet tried to break them. Her presence, though gone, wrapped around him now more than ever. Inside the cruiser hours earlier, the silence had almost swallowed the night whole. Al had broken it with steady resolve. "Before you get too proud of yourselves," he'd said, tone as calm as Riverstone, "call that Pentagon number. The woman who answers used to report to me." His words weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. They carried weight. And just like that, the snickering died. But it was too late for silence to fix what had been cracked wide open. The Greystone police station sat behind the town courthouse, its drab concrete walls dulled by years of indifference. Under flickering fluorescent lights, Officer Holt had marched Al through the front doors like he was hauling in a criminal instead of a decorated veteran. The desk sergeant barely looked up, slid a clipboard across without a word. Impersonation of a federal officer, Holt muttered, a grin curling at the edges. Resisting, too. His voice carried that smug flavor of a man convinced he was right. Al didn't bother responding. What was there to say? He'd trudged through jungles with shrapnel tearing at his flesh. He'd dragged wounded brothers through monsoon mud with mortars screaming overhead. This was just static. Noise that couldn't touch what he'd already survived. They placed him in a holding room, cinder block walls, metal chair bolted to the ground, cuffed to the table like he was dangerous. His cap lay discarded on the floor, his jacket flung into a corner like trash. Officer Ramsey leaned against the doorframe, sipping cheap coffee like he'd already claimed victory. Going to be on the news for this one, Ramsey bragged, nudging Holt with his elbow. Might even get a commendation. Holt laughed, sharp and crude. You see that badge he had? Looked like it came from a damn costume store. Al stayed still, breathing even, eyes on the clock crawling toward midnight. That was when the door creaked. Not slammed, creaked, and in walked Chief Ed Callahan. His sleeves were rolled halfway up, badge slanted slightly on his chest, eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights. He held Al's wallet in one hand, flipping the ID back and forth. This says you're retired First Sergeant Albert Reading? The chief asked. Al nodded once. That's correct. Bronze Star, Vietnam. Yes. Callahan turned slowly toward Ramsey, expression shifting. And these two say you faked it? Ramsey shrugged as if the truth were beneath him. Could be fake. I mean, nobody dresses like that unless they're looking for attention. Callahan's jaw tightened. Or maybe it's you two who need retraining. He tossed the wallet onto the table, folded his arms. I got a voicemail, he added, from a woman in D.C. voice like stone. Said we'd better call the number in that phone. Pentagon, top right contact. Al met his eyes without flinching. You'll want it on speaker. Callahan hesitated for a breath, then dialed. It rang 3 times. Office of Deputy Secretary Hargrove, said a clipped voice on the other end. Everything changed. Ramsey paled. Holt's smirk vanished. Callahan cleared his throat. This is Chief Ed Callahan, Greystone PD. I've got a man here claiming... He didn't finish. The voice cut him off like a blade drawn clean. Chief Callahan, this is Deputy Secretary Ela Hargrove. Where is Sergeant Ratting? The room froze. Al sat still, back straight, storm calm behind his eyes. Callahan fumbled, tried to explain. We believed he might be impersonating. You detained a decorated war veteran, Hargrove snapped. You ignored his ID, you cuffed him, humiliated him, and now you're calling me only because he asked you nicely. Silence hit like a dropped hammer. You have no idea who that man is, she went on, voice steely, each syllable sharpened. He served under fire while you were still learning how to spell chain of command. He trained half the men who briefed the Joint Chiefs this morning. And you treated him like a threat because of the color of his skin, because he didn't perform for you. Ramsey's jaw twitched. Holt inched backward, the flush draining from his face. You will release him, Hargrove said, voice unshaken. Right now, or I will have military police at your door in 20 minutes and a call into your governor before the sun comes up. Is that clear? Callahan blinked. Yes, ma'am. The cuffs came off within seconds. Al flexed his wrists, calm and measured, the way a soldier does after 1,000 push-ups on hard ground. Ramsey tried to speak. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was just noise. But Al raised a hand. Save it. I gave you a chance to do the right thing. Callahan offered the wallet back. Sergeant, this was a mistake. Al took it. No, he said, his voice low, sure. A mistake is forgetting someone's name. This was a choice. He rose, not taller, not louder, but more than he'd been when he walked in. The room felt smaller around him, like something sacred had just passed through. Callahan cleared his throat. Is there anything else we can do? Al held his question. Start by training your men to recognize a uniform. even when the man wearing it doesn't look like they expected. And then he walked out. Not rescued, not vindicated, but restored by truth, by history, by the strength of dignity that couldn't be broken. Back on the highway, the town looked the same buildings, same lights, but it wasn't the same. Across the street, a teenage girl had already uploaded her video, a minute and 14 seconds of shaky footage. An old man shoved against his truck, a calm voice rising against the silence. Call the number marked Pentagon. By dawn, it was on TikTok. By 9 a.m., 2 million views. By noon, cable anchors were saying his name. Sergeant Albert Reading, Bronze Star, 101st Airborne, Vietnam. At Ruby's diner, Jenny stood behind the counter, lips tight, eyes burning as microphones crowded in. I told them he was a vet, she said. I told them. Photos of Al flooded the internet, young, uniformed, medals shining, hand over heart. People shared their stories. My dad served with him in Da Nang. He helped fix my porch after my stroke. He never asked for anything. Greystone PD shut down comments on their pages, then deleted them. By sunset, protests formed outside the station. Cardboard signs high in the air. You saw color, not courage. He survived war zones, not your ignorance. Respect is earned. He earned it. Callahan attempted a press conference, but his voice broke under the weight of it all. We are reviewing procedures. No one wanted a review. They wanted justice. Ramsey placed on immediate leave. Holt suspended, pending investigation. Their pasts were dragged into the spotlight. Body cam clips, old complaints, warnings ignored, now headlines. And at Fort Campbell, a bulletin circulated. Retired First Sergeant Albert Reading, commended for valor, restraint, and enduring service under pressure. It wasn't about medals. Al didn't need another pin. But to every young soldier, especially those who looked like him, it meant everything. That night, Al sat on his porch as the last of the sun spilled gold across the yard. His phone buzzed, calls, messages, headlines. He didn't answer most of them. But when Jenny sent that photo from the protest holding her sign, he smiled. Not rescued, not celebrated, just seen. Finally seen. He stood beneath the autumn sun, holding a sign with his photo on it. For the first time in a long while, a smile broke across his face. Not because he craved attention, not because he needed to be celebrated, but because finally someone had seen him, truly seen him. And this time it wasn't just one person, it was the entire country. Something in Greystone had shifted, not in a way you could measure in headlines or declarations, but in the quiet ways that mattered. Attention eased, an understanding planted. You could feel it like the hush that follows a storm. The town council scrambled, held late-night meetings behind closed doors. The mayor stepped up to a podium and delivered a stiff, rehearsed statement about lessons learned. But everyone knew change didn't start there. Real change came from the folks who couldn't shake the image. An old man in a service jacket, standing tall in handcuffs. That image haunted them. It lived in their minds long after the news cycle moved on. 2 weeks later, Chief Ed Callahan submitted his resignation. No press conference, no fanfare, just a typed letter with a single line about accountability and a handshake that no one wanted to accept. He disappeared into retirement like smoke. His replacement came from Richmond, a black woman with a backbone made of community values. Her first day on the job, she didn't waste time. Bias training for every officer, public access to all body cam footage, civilian oversight boards. She didn't promise change, she enforced it. At Greystone High, teachers updated the curriculum. History class no longer stopped at treaties and timelines. It now included stories of veterans who fought 2 wars, one overseas and one back home. On the projector, one slide lingered longer than the others. A black and white image of Al Reading in his uniform, captioned with bold words, "Courage doesn't retire." Churches began hosting open forums. People sat side by side, pastors, teens, police officers, no uniforms, no ranks, just folding chairs and conversation. They talked about respect, about how it looks, how it doesn't. Someone always brought coffee. At the first meeting, Jenny stood up. Her voice trembled slightly, but her conviction never wavered. I knew who he was, she said. Why didn't they? Al kept his distance through it all. He didn't go to the gatherings, didn't pose for photos. He wasn't looking for parades or plaques. He'd had more ceremonies in one lifetime than most people could imagine. But when a young lieutenant from Fort Campbell reached out, asking for a conversation, Al didn't say no. They met at Ruby's, same booth as before. Al wore the same jacket. The lieutenant came in full dress blues. They didn't swap war stories. They talked about what waits beyond the battlefield. They're going to test me, the young man said quietly, because of how I look, because I don't speak unless I need to. Al gave a slow, knowing nod. They will. He replied, and they'll be loud about it. But don't meet their volume. Meet their excellence. He reached for a napkin, scribbled a name and number with a ballpoint pen, slid it across the table. Friend of mine at the Pentagon. Not for skipping steps, just in case they pretend you don't belong. The lieutenant looked down at the napkin like it was currency. Al stood, tucked a few bills under his coffee mug, paused before the door. Stand tall, he said. They'll learn, one way or another. And then he left, leaving the story not behind, but forward. Like a torch passed, months went by. Winter came and softened the edges of everything, but not the story. That stayed sharp. Al never stepped into the spotlight, didn't speak to the press or sit down for interviews. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for him. The quiet way he stood, the calm in his voice, the weight of a single phone call from the Pentagon. He didn't define dignity. He embodied it. At home, tucked inside a drawer, were the remnants of his service. Polished medals, a folded American flag, and an old phone, the same one that had rung that night. The contact still read Pentagon. He never changed it. Sometimes Jenny called, not to relive the past, but to share the small victories. The diner now gave discounts to all veterans. A framed photo of Al hung in the front window. Kids would walk by, point, and ask, "Is that the man from the story?" One cold morning, Al sat on his porch, thermos resting on his knee, watching the frost melt from the lawn. The chair next to his was empty, but it wasn't silent. He could still hear Sheila's voice, clear as ever. Hold your fire, Al. It burns brighter that way. The messages still came. Emails, letters, voicemails from strangers who didn't feel like strangers. Veterans who finally felt seen. Young men and women who now understood that strength didn't always raise its voice. One note stood out, a handwritten letter from a retired colonel down in Florida. It read simply, I served beside you once, I remember. Thank you for standing tall when they couldn't see. Al printed it out, folded it carefully, and placed it next to his Bronze Star. As for Officers Ramsey and Holt, the town moved on, but not with them. Holt disappeared, scrubbed his online presence clean. Ramsey, though, stuck around, wasn't behind a badge anymore. People saw him bagging groceries at the local market. The same neighbors who used to look right through Al now couldn't meet Ramsey's eyes. No shouting, no vengeance, just a quiet reckoning. That's what real justice feels like when it's earned, not forced, not loud, but lasting. That night, as the sky turned velvet and the house fell still, one of Sheila's old gospel playlists shuffled through the speakers. A familiar hymn came on, soft but clear. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Al smiled to himself, not out of pride, but peace, because sometimes that's all it takes. One quiet man standing firm to remind the world what respect truly looks like, and who has always deserved it.